Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now this video I'm honestly a little bit afraid to make, if I'm quite honest, because it's all going to be about Balthier, who is our global first LD and was met with some controversy when he was released. But I'm hoping to put into some plain terms all the different things that he's going to be able to do with his LD, despite the fact that he's not getting a rework, and hopefully put into perspective why I think Balthier is actually an extremely strong character that a lot of people seem to be glossing over. So if that's all stuff that you're interested in, or you just want to hate on me in the comments because you think I'm wrong, then stay tuned and keep on watching. As always, of course, don't forget to check all of my social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord, and Patreon. Of course, I will be streaming my pulls and my journey through the abyss when it's released at the weekend or Sunday, Monday, whenever January 31st is, along with Balthier, as I stream every Dissidia Opera Omnia event as it goes live. And obviously I'll be doing my FF count up. We're starting FF3 very soon as well, and FF14 on Sundays, and Smash Bros on Tuesdays. And obviously it's been crazy month for me on Twitch, so if you'd like to come and find me on there, then click on that link in the description box below. With regards to Patreon, I shout out one of my patrons at random every time I release a video or series of videos, and today that person is going to be Doc Shootums, who joined my Patreon fairly recently, but I didn't have time to make their title card before I got the video out because it was all a bit hectic on Monday. But I'm giving you your shout out now, so thank you very much for your support. I hope you like your title card and all the other benefits that come along with it. And of course, if you would like one, then of course maybe consider becoming a patron yourself. Don't forget to check out all of the other content creators that are just below me, and of course all the other websites as well that I have linked in the description box below if you want more resources for Dissidia. So before we go into opinions or anything, or I get hunted down with torches and pitchforks, etc., let's just talk about exactly what Balthier is, so that those of you who maybe haven't seen him being played before know exactly what he's capable of. Now, in terms of the banner, we don't know exactly what the banner is going to be because it's a global first, but we can safely assume that it will feature Ramza's Burst, Balthier's full kit including his global first LD, and Fran, given the fact that she was in the video trailer alongside Ramza and Balthier. As for a third character outside of the burst, I'm not entirely sure, but I would assume it's another FF12 character for the sake of Abyss. Now, Balthier has garnered some controversy amongst the OO community, and I can kind of understand some of it. I think that there are criticisms to be made for his kit, but I still think that there's a lot to really like about him. But again, before we go into any opinions and stuff, what Balthier's main niche before now is stealing buffs, which is a very niche thing. It's fun, it's silly. I've actually had Balthier EX purple since the first time it came out, and I have actually used him more than I thought I would, but he has definitely fallen off the wagon in terms of damage and things like that. So people were expecting a rework for him, and he isn't going to get one, which has disappointed a lot of people. But Great Aim and Snatch Shot are both very similar versions of the same thing, essentially. Now, Snatch Shot is an AoE Bravery single target HP attack that grants him a stack of a buff called Way of the Sky Pirate, that once he hits three stacks of, he gains physical attack up, max brave up, and attack up, so all of his attacking stats, as well as getting plus versions of his two skills that make it so that he's got an extra bravery hit or two on each of those attacks. Now they're actually very similar to each other in general, but Snatch Shot having brave AoE hits means that it's going to deal a decent amount of damage even though it's only 4 hits. If you have multiple enemies, it's 8 or even 12 hits if there's 3 enemies, and then a single target HP. So in terms of the actual bravery damage that he'll deal, if you're in an AoE fight, it's not as bad as you might think, although the fact that there's no splash damage or AoE damage at all on the HP attack does leave a little bit to be desired. And of course, it does steal a buff. So once you've got on everything, it will steal a buff from the enemy, so that you will get whatever buff that they had. Framed, unframed, it doesn't matter. He will dispel, and I'll use that word specifically to describe this because it will lead into what Balthier becomes once his LD and everything comes into the mix. He dispels a buff from the enemy pretty much with every skill that he has. Snatch Shot or Great Aim is similar, But instead of using bravery AoE hits, he instead raises his bravery based on a multiplier rather than like his attack or his initial bravery. So really he wants bravery gen or some form of bravery from another source before you can really use it. And then it does a 3-hit brave HP attack single target. So it's, again, the damage isn't fantastic. It really isn't particularly good. But as we'll cover when it comes to the LD and everything, damage is not the primary function for Balthier. His EX, however, actually doesn't do bad damage at all. Because of the way that damage will work here, and the fact that he's going to get quite a lot of attack buffs all over the place, I think that his EX attack, being a fast recasting EX, might surprise you at how much damage it can deal. So it's once you put everything into it, it's a 5-hit brave HP attack that does 100% AoE damage to all enemies. So that's decent enough damage by itself. I mean, 5 hits doesn't sound like a lot, but even with 2 enemies, if you're capping out damage, so this is an assumption that you're capping out damage, obviously if you're not then it's weaker, but if you're capping out damage, so 9999, for 2 enemies, you're hitting cap. So 10 times 9999 is 100%, 5 nines to all enemies. So that's still not terrible, but it also gives him Snatch, which is a buff that increases his attack and his Brave Overflow, which is useful, and it also like lowers enemies' attack and max bravery a bit. It's nothing to write home about, but it's a buff that isn't taking a debuff slot, and it's just kind of nice to have. And it also Izuna's, and again I'm going to use the word Izuna very specifically here, himself whenever he casts it. And then with his ingots and everything, he starts with like his buffs, then it's just raising the damage that Fires of War deals. But all of this on its own isn't fantastic. It's not. I used Balthier a fair few times. I wouldn't use him now, just based on what he has here. But I do think that his LD does change things for him pretty significantly. So again, before we go into any opinions of any kind, let's look at the LD and exactly what it does. Now his LD is actually kind of unique in its own way, because normally with an LD, you kind of want to cast it early because it gives you a buff or something like that you want to keep on top of because it only lasts for a certain amount of times and you want to keep hold of it as much as possible. Balthier's LD doesn't actually do that. The LD passive gives him a buff that is permanent. But let's talk about the LD, the actual attack itself. You get 3 uses of it, even with all of the limit breaks and everything, which isn't as many as some characters have. It's only 3 rather than 4. But it Izunas, or cleanses, all debuffs from your party, so not just him. Granted, it maxes out his Way of the Sky Pirate, but honestly this is fairly irrelevant. You're going to max out his Way of the Sky Pirate buff pretty quickly as far as I'm concerned. It also steals buff from each enemy, so does his EX, that also steals a buff from an enemy, I failed to mention. And it's another Brave HP attack with 100% HP damage to each target. So he's got 2 attacks that have 100% AoE damage. Yeah, the LD only has 3 uses of it, but because the EX is so fast recasting, it's like 1 HP plus and a skill use, or 3 HP pluses, and you'll get the EX back. But the main focus of this LD is that special effect, Skyplying Strahl. So for every turn that Balthier takes, so he starts with this at level 1, every turn that he takes, this will go up by 1 level to a maximum of 5, and he also gets a level from stealing a buff. Now, because this is increasing a level after using Balthier's turn, I'm fairly sure that this will include his C65, which is a bravery attack that steals bravery, and it will also probably trigger after he's used a call ability, although that's obviously quite tentative because it may not necessarily be treated as Balthier's turn, so that's tentative. But you get attacks like at max level, so max of level 5, so it takes a little bit of charging up, but so does his Way of the Sky Pirate buff, and it will take a couple of turns to get to it. But you get attack 50%, max brave 50%, bravery damage 20%, and HP damage 20% to your party. Now, first things first, this is a special effect. It's not a buff, it's not a debuff, so therefore it cannot be removed. There is the only way to remove this buff from Balthier is if he's dead. That's the only way, or if he's KO'd. That's the only way you can get rid of it. You can't be dispelled, can't be cleansed off, because characters like Charlotta suffer from being dispelled. Characters like Dark Knight Cecil and Kurosame suffer from having their abilities cleansed off. Balthier can't have that. The other big thing here is that it increases both bravery and HP damage. And at this point in time, in Global, the only character that does that is Lightning on her burst effect. There are other characters that will come out in the future that will do this, and there are characters that have been directly compared to Balthier, in my opinion unfairly, like Paladin Cecil, who you guys know how much I love Paladin Cecil and how extremely excited I am for him, because he has a similar thing on attached to his LD, in which he'll increase bravery damage by 50%, which is obviously bigger, and HP damage by 20% as well. Why not use both of them for a start? Like, people were saying, oh no, I'm not pulling for Balthier because Paladin Cecil. It's like, the pair of them together, those abilities will stack. And bravery and HP damage plus is huge. And I'll explain why mathematically. Bravery damage is HP damage. So bravery damage being increased by 20% obviously increases the amount of HP damage you're going to deal with that bravery damage. And then obviously with the HP damage plus, that then gets increased again. So it actually might as well read as 2 lots of HP damage plus. But also, because bravery reduction auras and things like that are quite so prevalent, percentage-based bravery damage increases are actually a much bigger deal than you might think. And then the attack and max bravery aura, that's like on a similar level. It's not quite as big a level as somebody like Ramza or Alphino, etc. But it's pretty up there considering all the other stuff you get along with it and the fact that it's not tied to a buff or a debuff. Now, the reason I think Balthier is much better than people are making him out to be is because his role, or roles, have changed. He's not a primary damage dealer. He never was one. And he's leaned more into a supporting role. It actually says it in the video. It's a joke at his expense. I'm the leading man. No, I think you're actually taking more of a supporting role. This is actually very apt because he covers a lot of gaps that a lot of characters don't have. Purely on the back of the fact that he has Izuna and Dispel in his kit at the same time. The only other character that has that, or anything even close to it, is Yuffie, who isn't getting her LD for a very long time, and is not a character that's commonly used at this point in time. She has her niches in that she like reflects debuffs back and things like that. But similarly, Balthier steals framed buffs, so it's similar, but it's done differently. This on top of the fact that he does actually have a pretty like decently damaging AoE, EX, and LD as well. On top of that, as well as this really powerful special effect, and I will go into just how powerful this is when I talk about some applications that are going to be useful for Balthier in just a moment, but there's a lot there. He's not perfect. He's not perfect. I think the problem is that people were expecting completely back-breaking, broken, usable in every event characters, and he isn't that character. But neither was Vivi, to be fair. Vivi was a AoE damage dealer at heart. Big numbers, that was his thing. It's not what Balthier is there for. So people who are expecting a high-end damage dealer are going to be disappointed because it was never going to be what Balthier is. However, the things that you can unlock using Balthier and the different compositions and combinations that you can use with him are actually really powerful. Now, we don't know an awful lot of details about all the little bits and pieces that Balthier will get with his level 80. We know for a fact that he's not going to have LD boards on his LD weapon, which is again something that disappointed a lot of players, and I can understand that. Although honestly, this is a fairly loaded LD, and the reason that they've done that is because when they release it in JP, they're going to release it all at once then. So it gives us reason to have something to look forward to in the future, because Balthier will get buffed again when his LD board comes back around. But in terms of high armor, by the looks of the video, Balthier was dealing 12,000 damage per bravery hit, which gives me reason to believe that his high armor is of the attack keystone. And honestly, Balthier definitely benefits from having this, purely because he is a low hit count, high damage. Like, his attack is actually very high, and his brave overflow is actually very high. But he's going to benefit from that extra damage cap more than most, because, like I said, 10 times 9999, like assuming that there's 2 enemies and you're using Fires of War, is 99999 to all enemies. Having the 20% extra bravery cap on top of that is actually quite beneficial to him, because it means his damage is going to be significantly better. It means that Snatch Shot will deal a much, much greater amount of damage. It means his Brave Shaving capabilities are slightly better. I mean, people say that they want to see a better hit count for Brave Shaving, and again, I understand that. Balthier is not perfect. At no point am I saying that he's perfect, because he isn't. But that he's not as terrible in damage, and people are saying he's not usable in Lufenia at all, and I can say with confidence that I don't think that that's true in the slightest. In terms of his artifacts, then simply giving him attack and a max bravery is an option for you, because the rest of his stuff isn't anything particularly exciting. He was an early release character, so that's nothing to write home about. And also the fact that he has doesn't have LD boards. He's probably going to have like great aim as his call ability. But that in and of itself could be quite interesting, because if it steals a buff and adds it to the caller, or the character that called him, that could open some interesting interactions as well. But you're likely to want to use a character that's got LD boards from this point anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about that bit. So, because we don't know an awful lot about the Abyss event that's coming along with Balthier, instead of that, I wanted to talk about some of the applications that I think that Balthier will have. Because as I said, there are a lot of people out there that are saying, oh, he's not going to be usable in Lufenia. Well, like I said, I don't think that that's true, and I think that he might surprise you. Because Balthier is not a be-all, end-all character, he does carve a niche. Like, he's not a character you will bring to everything. He's awful in single-target fights. Like, he's awful in them. His damage is very, very dependent on there being multiple enemies on the board. But if, like, most Lufenias have 2 or more enemies, or if a character is like, or if a boss is one that summons adds, then Balthier actually will do quite well against those particular fights. So the kind of applications that I've been looking at in terms of where I could plan to use him, there's one in particular that actually helps my pulling plan, and it changes it slightly in a way that makes me very happy. The first of it I want to talk about is Onion Knights, the story Lufenia, which is the Medusa heads. Now, Balthier doesn't do anything to the orb for that in any way, but he could be treated as a fail-safe, because at one point, if the Medusa heads break your characters, they instantly petrify them. Now, obviously, in a Lufenia mission, that's backbreaking. But Balthier can actually get around that by Azuna-ing your party with his LD. Now, you only get 3 uses of the LD, but you shouldn't need more than 3. If you're taking more than 3 breaks from that, then you probably should be using a different team anyway. But the fact of the matter is that Balthier will increase the damage capabilities of his party members in a significant manner, while still being able to cleanse any debuffs that are on the party, including the much dreaded Petrify. That's actually a lesser use for him. RCL as Lufenia, he will be absolutely fantastic for, because Dispel is the name of the game with that particular fight, and obviously Balthier can, like, it does count as Dispel when Balthier steals a buff. So like I said, stealing the buff is not what you should be focusing on. It's Dispel plus. It's just Dispel. If you just think of it that way, then you kind of take on what Balthier is all about. Like I said, he fills gaps. So he has Dispel and Azuna in his kit and a massive aura, and he does bits of damage here and there when needed. Now, Theodore's Lufenia is actually a really interesting one, because the main thing for that one is cleansing or Azuna. And Balthier does that with both his LD and his EX. His LD is the only one that does it to his party, but he does it with his EX to himself every time he uses it. So the fact that you have a fast-casting EX and an LD that both Azuna in some manner or another means that you don't necessarily have to pull for Theodore if you have Balthier. Because Theodore's Lufenia, if you look at my Future Pulls 3, that was like a portion of time where I was like, I really don't want to pull for Theodore because I want to wait for Cecil straight after him. And Balthier actually kind of eases that burden quite nicely. And then even further in the future, I actually think that Balthier might be quite useful in Eld Nash's Lufenia, purely because they have, like, they're really good at building up shields, they summon adds, AoE damage is really useful. They're also known for being really tanky. So having the Brave damage, HP damage, attack, and max bravery up in your party alongside other characters that have similar things means that he's probably going to be quite useful for that as well. So other than that, I actually wanted to talk about characters that I think would work really well with Balthier, because while I think that Cecil is a fantastic character and is one that most people will be pulling on, the main feature of Cecil that makes him so good, Balthier also has. So like I said earlier, why not run them both? Like, Cecil has a double HP dump in his EX, which is going to benefit massively not only from his own aura, but Balthier's as well, and then Balthier also gets Holy, Imperil, and Enchant from that. And that's actually something else that's noteworthy about Balthier over Cecil. Or actually, it's a double-edged sword, it can be taken either way. Now, he's non-elemental, which means that if you're against a range resist fight, of which there are a few, you're kind of going to want to take an Imperil Enchanter along with him in order to make him so that he can actually do anything at all. But because he's non-elemental, it means he's not locked out of any particular elemental damage. So Cecil's fantastic, but if the enemy absorbs Holy, then you're not going to take Cecil along. But I actually really like the pairing of Cecil and Balthier, because Cecil covers everything that Balthier doesn't, and Balthier covers the few things that Cecil doesn't do, which is manipulation of those green and red boxes that appear on the screen that you didn't make, because he is like the master of them. If they've got framed buffs, get rid of them. If you've got debuffs, get rid of them. That's the bit that people should be focusing on when it comes to Balthier, is him as a support character. Ramza and Balthier are fantastic. Between the pair of them, there's not an awful lot they don't cover. You'd be like, Ramza has the instant break, he's got launch, he's got delay, he's got attack buffs that aren't the same attack buffs that Balthier has. He's got launch, he's got like delay, Balthier's got Azuna, Balthier's got dispel. The damage isn't going to be fantastic between them, but stick Dark Knight Cecil next to them. You have two launchers that are dealing crazy amounts of damage and are dealing bravery damage plus HP damage plus twice, because Dark Knight Cecil and Balthier have it, and their attack is through the roof. Between Ramza and Balthier alone, if you have Ramza's burst effect up as well, you're looking at upwards of 210% attack buff, which is massive. You can make it better with other characters, but you'd need to take characters like Alphino, who don't deal as much damage or don't have the HP damage plus or anything like that to boot. The bravery HP damage up is a massive combination. I cannot stress that enough. Looking into the future, Ultimisia, not a character particularly well known for her damage output, because her bravery damage is quite low comparatively to other damage-focused characters. Her burst makes it better, definitely, because she has more base attack to work off of. But having Balthier next to her, she will deal significantly more damage based on the fact that she doesn't have to worry about buffs, she's got the Brave and HP damage up, and the fact that she's got the attack and max Brave up as well. She's not a character that's well known for capping out on damage, so she will benefit from him. Then Kuja. Kuja's Seraphic Star, next to Balthier, before Paladin Cecil even becomes a thing, but if they're not resistant to Holy, Kuja, Paladin Cecil, Balthier, that Seraphic Star is going to hurt. Ultima. People complain that Ultima doesn't deal enough damage, so stick a character next to him that makes him deal a lot more damage. You won't even have to worry about Balthier's damage at that point, because Kuja's doing all the work for you. Off-turn damage dealers. Emperor. When Emperor's burst comes around and he comes back into the fray, not only does Balthier increase his damage, he gets rid of any framed buffs they might have that would get in the way of Emperor's framed debuffs. So like I said, do I think Balthier's broken? No, I don't. I think he's very good, but I think he does have major weaknesses. He doesn't deal a lot of damage by himself. He's got bravery hit. His bravery hits do leave a lot to be desired. Could he have done with a rework? Yeah. Do I understand why he doesn't have one? Yeah. And do I think that he's worth pulling for? Yeah. So now comes the big question, do I think that you should pull for Balthier? Honestly, the answer depends entirely on you. The first thing that I want to point out that's against Balthier, funnily enough, is the fact that JP didn't have him. And JP managed to get on perfectly fine without him, so you could take this chance to gain some extra resources knowing that because Balthier wasn't there for with this kit at this time, with this LD, etc., there's no mandatory reason. He's not going to be mandatory for anything because other characters will cover the things that he can do in different ways. And his bravery damage is off-putting. The fact that he doesn't have a very large bravery hit count is a shame. However, I think that people underestimate how powerful getting that brave HP damage up permanently for your party at this point in time is. The only character that does that is Lightning, and we all know how good she is. Having that on top of and compounding other characters while having Azuna / Dispel at the same time and attack auras, and honestly, I think people will be surprised at his damage output. I think that the EX and the LD in combination with his high armor, I think you'd be surprised how much damage Balthier can actually deal. Even his skill 1. Skill 2, that one's a bit iffy, but even his skill 1, he wouldn't deal terrible damage as long as there's more than one enemy on the board or an enemy that summons adds. And honestly, you could look at it the other way. JP didn't have Balthier at this point in time. Therefore, there are going to be applications for him that JP didn't cater for at the time. So therefore, you could take advantage of getting Balthier, and in my opinion at least, I plan on picking up Balthier because it means that I can skip out on other characters that I was concerned about having to pull for before, namely Theodore and Arciella. Because you can actually get around pulling for both of them if you have Balthier already. But honestly, there are going to be naysayers no matter what I say at this point, and people have already made their minds up about Balthier, and you know what? That's fine. You don't have to pull for him. I am only here to advise and to give you information based on my own research. I can't say for a fact whether everything I say is going to be factually correct, because it may not be, but my initial impressions of Balthier are honestly very positive. So now it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to voice your opinions on any given banner, whether you would or wouldn't pull on them, and why. Now, a big part of the reason that I make my Would You Pull videos, or portions of the video, is because I want to showcase opinions other than my own. There are a lot of people out there that play Dissidia Opera Omnia, and other people's opinions may of course differ from mine, but there are over 100 people who vote and comment in my Would You Pull portions, and a massive thank you once again to all of my patrons for taking part in doing so, because I think it gives people a wider scope on kind of the ideas that people have behind why they are or aren't pulling on it. Now, in terms of the actual numbers, 47% of people who voted said yes, they would pull on this banner with gems. 45% of people said yes, they were going to pull on this banner with tickets, and only 8% of people said no, they weren't going to pull on this banner at all. So, despite the fact that you see a lot of hate towards Balthier on the internet, on your Reddits, game FAQs, Facebook, all that kind of thing, I think a lot more people are going to pull on this banner than you might think. And I think, honestly, a lot of the people that say they're pulling on tickets are probably in the same boat as me, where they already have his EX and are only after the LD. So that also has something to factor into it as well. Now, GFiddy says, I'll throw some tickets at this one. Those LD aura buffs are absolutely insane, but no rework on his base kit does worry me a bit. I won't be too fussed if I miss this weapon, but it would be nice to have in my back pocket. I can understand this. I think that there is a lot of hesitation based on Balthier's base kit, but I think once people start to understand that Balthier's role has shifted and that there are other support characters, Ramza being a fantastic example, Ramza, without his burst, doesn't actually deal all that much damage. One of his skills doesn't actually do damage at all, but in Galvanize, but he's still a fantastic character. Yes, his LD provides a launch and stuff like that, so his damage capabilities are there, but Balthier has damage capabilities through his EX and his LD. They're just a little bit different. Spickle says, I will be using tickets to Balthier. Luckily, he comes after Divine Diablo, so I'll have tickets to use. I have him maxed out, and that special effect will be great for when enemies reduce the brave damage they take via aura. Yes, Mama, this is this is the tea. The bravery damage up is way, way, way better than people are giving it credit for, because it is essentially HP damage up, but it's also bypassing, to some extent, any brave reduction auras that come in the future. And I spoke about this earlier, but I cannot state it enough. Brave and HP damage increases. We've seen this on Lightning already. We know it's coming on Cecil. It's really powerful, so to just ignore it would be a massive shame. Kazira says, likely a skip from me. He unfortunately lacks LD boards, and it seems his kit remains as it has been. I've already got a full hit pity heading towards Ramza, and the rest of my tickets and gems are already taken for others. So this is a good point. If you don't want to adjust the plans that you've already made, you don't have to. You don't have to go for Balthier. Like I said, JB didn't have him, and they all functioned perfectly fine. I think that people saying, I don't want to pull for Balthier because, and they've got reasons to pull on other things, is perfectly fair. However, I think people who are saying that Balthier is bad might need to look at him a little bit closer. And then finally, Malachus says, I plan to use tickets for the most part. With Penelo, Hope, and Cryol NLDs coming in quick succession, I'd like to try and keep some gems for them. I don't have anybody with the ability to steal debuffs, let alone remove them from enemies, so that would be something nice to have. I've also been holding onto his EX for a good while now, and those auras. Like I said, Balthier is a support character. He's not a damage dealer. He does okay damage. He doesn't do great damage, but he does okay damage. But the auras, the Izuna, the Dispel, all rolled into one means he covers numerous roles at the same time, and that cannot be ignored. So that's going to be it for this video. Sound off in the comments below, although I'm sure I don't need to be telling people to be doing that with regards to Balthier, because I really like him, and I'm sure I'm waiting for the wash of comments down below that disagree with me. But I invite you to do so, and give your reasons as to why as well, because I like hearing from people who have differing opinions from me, and others, etc., because it makes for a discussion, and I think it's really healthy to have. Just don't send hate towards people for it. Don't send hate towards Square. Don't send hate towards me saying that I've rigged it because I thought Balthier was going to be one of the prospects, because I didn't. I can tell you that for free. And obviously, just be pleasant about what you like. Make a healthy discussion about Balthier, because it's a nice thing to have. Obviously, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click that bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And, well, you know now that I'll be pulling for Balthier, so if you want to see him in action, hopefully, then come and find me on Twitch, and we'll see plenty of him from there with any luck. Anyways, that's going to be it from me. Enjoy the game and everything like that, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.